Hi there. My name is Neil, and my friend Pete here and I just did a canoe trip this past summer on the Mistassibi Nord-Est, so the northeast Mistassibi River in the Lac St-Jean region. So this video is just all our planning information so that if you want to do this river, you'll have all the information you need.
And what a beautiful river it is. And it makes you want to go back to the Lac St-Jean area, because if the other rivers flowing into Lac St-Jean or anything like this, it's worth doing them all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in that region, famously, you have the Ashuapmushuan, you have the Duchef, you have the Peribonka, you have the Mistassibi, or otherwise known as the Mistassibi Nord-West, and the Mistassini. But of course, we did the Mistassibi Nord-Est. The only advice I guess we have is that you probably want to download your maps, Pete, before you go, because you could get lost if you lose connectivity.
Which happens,
apparently. Right, it happens to the best of us. Okay, cool. So the river itself, beautiful river, clear, fast-moving, remote river. It is much less traveled than the Mistassibi. So the Mistassibi Nord-Est is much more remote, and the access to it is kind of harder to get to. And basically, it is a river that we can think about in three parts: the upper, the middle, and the lower. Talking about getting there, so from Dolbeau, Mistassini, we took our own vehicles to the takeout point, about an hour on the forestry road, and then got the everything on the shuttle van and all our stuff, and that was about another hour up to the put-in point on the logging road, and then we paddled back to the takeout where our vehicles were waiting for us. So it worked really well, actually, with the shuttle driver, although he was going too fast for my liking and there was dust on the road, but it was a beautiful
To be fair,
drive.
we were a bit on the late side getting started in the morning, so maybe he had things to get back to.
True, absolutely. And then driving up to the upper, it's funny, there was a forest fire there in June of 2010. You would think it would all be grown back by now, but actually it looked a little bit like you were in the Barren Lands or something. You could see the exposed rock and really small trees. So it was pretty cool arriving.
Yep. And the first part of the river had that feel of northern space. I don't know if it was from the fire or if it was a different geology or different biology at that point, ecozone. But more shrubby kind of things. Kind of expect to see bears walking out of the bushes, looking for berries. But then as we progressed down the river, the trees got bigger, and it got more what I would think of a boreal forest. So
Yeah.
you kind of saw that transition as you went, which kind of really gave you a sense of making progress beyond just the rocks going by.
Absolutely. And meanwhile, the water, I mean, there were some class 1 and 2 rapids to start off with, but it quickly got to be continuous rapids and even technical rapids. Mind you, we were at relatively low water levels. We were at 219 to 230 cubic meters per second, whereas what they sort of recommend is 300 cubic meters per second to be perfect. So,
and if I can cut in on that, because it was low water, and there were a few places where it felt low, but for the most part, we weren't dragging very much. We didn't have to get out and drag the boat over long rock bars or anything like that. So even at that low water, it obviously changed the dynamics in a few places for the rapids. It wasn't a slog in terms of dragging the boats over rocks. So that was good.
Yeah, and at higher water levels, people say this river is one that you can do with very few portages, that there's only 1 or 2 mandatory portages. We didn't find that to be the case at our water level, so we did portage and line a few times. So as the river got bigger, as you're describing, Pete, sort of to the middle of it, you started to see trees again. We were out of the burn area. The trees were still not huge, but they weren't, sort of barren. And the river kind of picked up, and it was beautiful rapids and beautiful, but you had to eddy out and you had to make moves from time to time. In fact, I would say that in general, I found the river classifications were on the low side. So if it was marked as a class 1,
So in this
well,
water
it might
level,
really be a class.
there was a lot of long, ongoing rapids, particularly in the first half of the river, where 500 meters of rapids before you get to a bit of a pond at the end of them. So that really kept you on your toes for a long period of time. And I really like those kinds of rivers because it's you're in it. It's not insane. You're probably not going to die, but it keeps you jumping, and there's always something coming up on you. So, and there was a lot of those that were like that. But there was always some place, maybe 500 meters down the way, where you can kind of collect stuff if that was necessary. As we got farther down, the rapids became more of the drop and pull, kind of a little bit shorter, with a little bit longer distances in between them of calm paddling. But of course, there's big water all the way through in terms of keeping the current flowing, and just sitting there, you're making good progress just sitting, having a snack, drinking some water as you were working your way down the river.
Yeah, so true. This is not the trip to forget your bailer, for example, because in those continuous rapids, you take on a little bit, and a couple of times we sort of submarined a little bit just from taking on water. So that was really good. And then you mentioned the compound rapids. I remember one rapid, this is further down the river, but where you kind of had a class 1 turning into a class 2, turning into a class 3, and then with a shelf or two at the bottom. And I think most of us spilled on that rapid going down it. So, it happens like that. And then, you eddy out and recover down. So you need basic whitewater skills. I would say intermediate whitewater skills if you're going to do this river.
On that, like when you look at the map, it's really, I found a very good map in terms of it identified all the rapids. Sometimes it's hard to know, is this the next one, or is that a little bit of the previous one? Because things may be different because it's low water. But where the shelves were, where the big rapids were all very well marked. So I thought that was very good that you could rely on the maps to quite a big extent. Always keeping your eyes open, of course, because you never know what Mother Nature's going to toss across the river on you and stand you up.
Absolutely, yeah. The map that you can get on Carte Plein Air is really good. It was updated relatively recently, and as Pete's saying, is really, really accurate on that map. So if you look at that map, we put in what, Pete, at
158, kilometer 158, which is for the river. For the road, it's at 240 kilometers on the road. So the numbers don't match up because road obviously does not follow the river exactly. But yes, we started at 158 and we took out at around the 50K mark, if I remember correctly.
Right. And then as you can see on the map, there's the indications for the rapids are all there and they should be followed. There are also the indications of where they suggest lining or portaging. Now you gotta your French has to be up to snuff to get it. And then there's also these sections where they've got kind of the arrow pointing to EV, OV, or class 1 or class 2, and that means continuous. So that's not just sort of 2 bits, that's a whole continuous portion of it. So you can see there's robust rapids pretty much the whole way down. And then as you get to the bottom of the river, of course, it takes on more water as the streams and tributaries come in. And while there's still, continuous class 2 rapids in places, it's not as intense problem solving as you do higher up the river.
Yeah, and with the flow of the river, it was a hard trip, but not the paddling wasn't hard. It put in some honest days, but it wasn't a slog because you did have that water going with you. The portages in the early stages of the river, there's a couple of liftovers and like a shelf to go, to work around. It was down at the bottom, second half of the river, let's say, where there were 2 significant portages that those were slogs. And there was a couple of spots where we had to line it, which actually I find quite fun because it's, you're kind of working with the current, push the boat out and let it float down and pull it in and hand it off to the next person. And we had a very big group. We were 12 people. So, we could kind of do a fire line for the boats and kind of hand them off down the river and get those linings done quite quickly. So that was really nice.
Our campsites, we camped first off at a 5B campsite at kilometer 153. That was gorgeous. That was a beach. It was open. It should have been a GA as far as I'm concerned. Beautiful campsite. Then we camped at a 4C campsite at kilometer 143. And then we camped at a 5B campsite at kilometer 110, a GB campsite at kilometer 92, and then a GB campsite at kilometer 68. But all of them were great. I mean, I didn't feel hard done by in any of those campsites.
No, they had plenty of room for 6 tents. And there's plenty of wood around, so we were able to have, fortunately there wasn't a fire ban, so we were able to have campfires, and that was enjoyable.
Absolutely. And a couple other note on the campsites. The first thing to say is this is not in a park, either a Quebec park or a national park. So we didn't have to make any reservations, which was great. It's Crown land, so you just do your thing. The second thing to say is that as good as the campsites were, and they were good, they were worth gunning for, the big ones and everything, it was hard to bushwhack. I think on the terrain that we were, it would have been hard to camp outside of a designated site. So the campsites were where the campsites were.
Yeah. Now the portages, and there were only 2 big portages that we had. There was a bunch of small ones. There was some shelves that we had to, like do 50 feet portages around, stuff like that. So those were easy. But the 2 big ones, and they're on the map, they were tough. They were long. They were not as well developed as you would get in a park, but it's not a park. There were times we had to turn the canoe sideways to get it between trees. There were, just because of the type of terrain, there were, holes that would, swallow your leg along the path, just because, in between roots and stuff like that. So you had to be careful on those portages. You had to take your time. And there were times when it was, 2 people kind of wrestling the boat rather than the graceful, canoe on head, dancing down the path. So those 2 portages in particular were a bit of slogging. In fact, that's where most of the bugs I came across anyway was on one of those portages where it was a field of, part of it was a field of bushes about knee high. And from knee down, I was solid red from bug bites and scratches. But that's the joys of camping.
Yeah, it was definitely type 2 fun there for at least a day, where we were doing tough portaging. Also, we had a couple of tips, and then the bugs were out, and it was hard work. It made for an honest canoe trip. So it's not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. Just to mention, our base that we used was the Motel Chute des Pères, which is in Dolbeau, Mistassini. There's plenty of hotels and Airbnbs and VRBOs that you can rent, but I just want to put in a good word for the Motel Chute des Pères. Beautiful facility, nice restaurant. There's both camping and hotel, and it's at the base of that spectacular waterfall. Yeah, the outfitter was Saguenay Aventure, and I'll put the link in the description. But they're in the region, and it's a bit of a drive for them to get to us. But as Pete says, very well organized, on time, great shuttle service, and it all worked out in terms of returning the canoes. Of course, they had to collect their canoes at the end, so that also worked out pretty well. So there you have it. That's the Rivière Mistassibi Nord-Est in the Lac St-Jean region. A challenging but exhilarating whitewater, very remote, and a great trip to be had for us. It was a 6-day trip. Excellent. So maybe we'll see you out there. Take care.
Cheers.